I'd like to begin by introducing you to and ground our thinking in Wisconsin's RTI framework for an equitable multi-level system of support. This graphic represents our state's framework. Our session connects to a strong universal system and specifically the key feature of positive culture. Positive culture is the collective sense of purpose and commitment to ensure the well-being, sense of belonging, safety, and success of every learner. Meaningful change depends on the degree to which staff share this commitment and sense of purpose. An unwavering commitment to the success of every learner, grounded in adult practices and a strengths-based lens. It is the adults who develop the system to create environments in which all students feel physically, socially, emotionally, intellectually, and culturally validated, safe, and supported. This session will explore these elements of a strong universal system and specifically address how adult practices enhance learning and relationships that foster positive culture. You will be asked to consider practices which build trust with students and be given time to reflect on these practices. So keep those journals handy. Equity is at the center of this framework. To challenge and change inequitable access, opportunity, and outcomes experienced by learners currently underserved in Wisconsin schools. You will hear equity embedded throughout this session, as equity is at the heart of and essential for trusting relationships, and therefore will be considered an integral part rather than a separate practice. There are 3 outcomes for our session today. At the end, we want you to be able to explain the connection between a strong universal system and mental health and wellness practices. We will support you in identifying at least 2 practices which enhance relationships that you can take back to your team. And we will explore and create next steps to use these practices you identify. Establishing a school environment that is predictable and positive encourages a sense of belonging and community for both staff and students. This doesn't just pertain to the relationship between teachers and students, but also peer-to-peer and across all staff. As we develop nurturing and supportive environments within the walls of our classroom, this safety net expands with our whole school building, contributing to effective and equitable learning environments for each and every student. Now we're going to give you a reflection question to reflect on individually. I'm going to give you 2 minutes of time to think about a teacher you trusted over the course of your life. What made you trust the teacher?
So I'm seeing a lot of comments about this person believed in me. They understood me. We had a relationship. They understood that I was struggling and they felt comfortable to go to this person. They listened to them. They also shared their own flaws. That just gave me goosebumps. So that teacher or that person is human, and they were vulnerable enough and authentic to, show some of those shortcomings and just say, hey, I'm a person too. They were friendly. They were kind to everybody. Ooh, lots about good listening skills. They help find solutions. Honest, trustworthy, loved me no matter what. Love that. Honest feedback. Took the time to get to know them outside of school. So it wasn't just about academics. Consistent, coach, kindness, encouraged, supported, connection, trust, mutual respect. Again, there's a lot of really great chat stuff.
That sounds amazing. And those are actually a lot of the things that I think about when I think about the teacher that I trusted the most in high school. Well, that's pretty cool. So, well, thank you for taking the time to reflect. That's really important. And we're going to talk now about a little bit more about brain science. I know Rhonda Neese talked about brain science this morning, and we're going to make some connections now too. We know that there's a direct connection between the brain's response to the environment and the release of cortisol to learning or lack of learning. In her book, Cultural Responsive Teaching in the Brain, Zaretta Hammond shares with us that fear activates the amygdala in the brain, which then releases the hormone cortisol. So this is the opposite of those happy hormones that she was talking about this morning, that Rhonda was talking about this morning. The amygdala takes over the brain's other systems, leading to the fight, flight, or freeze response. This cortisol release then stops and prevents all learning for at least 20 minutes, but up to 3 hours, which is half of a school day. Trust, on the other hand, deactivates the amygdala, which in turn blocks the release of cortisol, therefore freeing the brain to learn. The implication is this: when we experience a fearful event, trust can mitigate our fear response and our students' fear responses so learning can continue. These brain events have critical impact on students' learning experiences and their environments. We also know that the brain is programmed to search continuously for threat. And when the hint of threat is detected, the brain's capacity is spent minimizing these threats and seeking safety and belonging. Positive relationships reduce the need to search for threat, and when the threat is detected, these positive relationships help the amygdala to stay calm and block the release of cortisol. As adults in the educational setting, it is our responsibility to create trusting and nurturing environments so that the brains of our students are free to learn. So knowing the science behind how positive relationships create emotionally safe learning environments is a start. We then build our capacity to know actions and inactions that weaken relationships and those that strengthen relationships. On the right side of this graphic are actions that strengthen relationships and foster positive classroom culture, such as listening and affirming. On the left side are actions that weaken relationships, create fear, and detract from positive culture, such as othering and shaming. We, the adults within the system, need to intentionally provide those strengtheners on the right and intentionally avoid the weakeners on the left. As we recognize and appreciate each and every learner for the strengths and unique abilities they bring to the classroom community, we provide opportunities for students to be heard in a way that so they never feel invisible. We show empathy and we build our ability to truly listen as we continue to seek to understand instead of judge. Through words and actions, we tell each and every student that they belong. We intentionally avoid words and actions that invalidate or harm students, such as microaggressions. A microaggression is a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. For instance, experiencing prolonged mispronunciation of one's name or being told one speaks well for someone like them are examples of microaggressions. Then we have the concept of othering. Othering is when students are told subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, that they do not belong. Othering can be physical removal, but it can also be social and emotional distancing. One form of othering is the clip chart that publicly shows which students are not doing what you're expecting them to be doing. All students know who is on red, or whichever the lowest color you're using is, and at least 50% of our families know too, because our students come home and talk about it. Clip charts create shame, which triggers cortisol and reduces the ability to learn. We will be referring back to the actions on the right side of this graphic, the relationship strengtheners, as we discuss strong mental wellness practices. As we talk through these practices, I want you to think about how you'll bring these back to your leadership team to systematically implement across your school. So everyone in the school is implementing the practice so that all students have access to these strategies or the strategy that you choose. We'll come back to that towards the end of the session again. These strategies can be used with both virtual or in-person instruction. Consider your virtual platform when applying these practices for remote instruction. As a reminder, we'll be asking to reflect on and journal 2 practices that you'll be bringing back to your team. So the first line of providing safety for students is calling them by their name. Ask students to tell you what name they want to go by. Use the name even if it's not their given legal name. For example, a student might say, "My name is Michael, but I go by my middle name, Aaron." Then you call them Aaron. If there's a gender nonconforming student and they go by Alice, then you call them Alice. Consider putting into place a systemic process across a school or even a district where before the school year starts, all students indicate the name they want to be called, how to phonetically pronounce the name, and the pronouns they go by. Everyone in the learning environment needs to know the correct pronunciation of everyone else's name. When you use someone's name, you recognize their identity. It's simple, but it helps your students know that they are being seen. By taking this step, you will be listening, validating, and affirming students, strengthening your relationship with them, forming that trust, and helping to mitigate the fear response. Active listening, which I know was mentioned in chat, communicates respect and interest in an individual, which builds trust. Do you know that 70% of communication is nonverbal? Posture should be open and inviting. Be at eye level with students and look at the students even if the student is not looking at you. Do not require eye contact. Part of this is knowing our students and their comfort level with eye contact, which can be cultural or sensory related. Nonverbal acknowledgments, like a head nod, can be reassuring that we are being heard. In a virtual setting, cameras help tremendously with nonverbal communication. It is important to consider that all students may not be comfortable with a window into their home, however, so we have to consider that. In terms of verbal response, restate or paraphrase back to the student what they said and ask them if you heard them correctly. Clarifying questions can assure students that you were listening and that you were seeking to find out if you heard them correctly. When students are offering feedback to you as a teacher, consider how you could use that feedback and make changes based on the suggestions. For instance, a student may ask, "Can I show you my understanding of the parts of the cell other than writing a paper, in another way other than writing a paper?" You could ask, "Do you have a suggestion for me to consider?" You still consider the standard and what you need the student to know and be able to do before making a decision. The consideration alone notes to the student that you listened and that you're open to suggestions. With this step, you will be listening and building a sense of belonging for a student and creating positive culture. The 2x10 strategy, which I know somebody mentioned in chat, is when you meet for 2 minutes for each day for 10 school days in a row with a specific student about anything the student is interested in, as long as it's appropriate for school. The key to this relationship building conversation is that the focus is on what the student is interested in and not what the teacher expects or needs from the student. This is a low risk, high return strategy. First, you want to identify a student you'd like to form a better and more trusting relationship with. Is there anyone that comes to mind? Someone you have struggled to connect with? If you had a relationship with a student, would that help their learning and engage them in the class? This will be your motivation. Then consider the time during the day that you can take 2 minutes. Consider the best time of day, not only for your schedule, but also consider the student's best time of day. For some students, the best time of day is right away in the morning. For others, that would be the worst time of day, but right before lunch might be a better time. In times of remote learning, you might have time before or after class, or you may have open office hours or study hall. If this is a new skill for you, you may need to set up a calendar reminder to get yourself into this habit. Finally, identify how to start the conversation. Consider what you already know about the student's interest. Do they have a pet? Or if they don't, what kind of pet would they want to have if they could? Or consider an open-ended question like, what are your interests outside of school? What's your favorite food? Or do you have any hobbies? If you could go on vacation anywhere, where would you go? We all want to have that conversation right now. The student's answer will guide the conversation. Do this for 10 consecutive days. Maybe you'll find the student seeking you out beyond those 10 days. By taking this step, you will be listening, validating, and affirming and giving choice and voice to the student. The next strategy is the comment box. Place a comment box in your classroom in an area that students frequent but do not typically congregate, such as maybe near materials. You want the students to feel comfortable putting comments in the box, so location matters. Teach your students the purpose and when and how to use it. Review the comments once or twice a week and respond to them by following up with the individual student or make a change based on anonymous feedback. Here's an example of how to use feedback. A student anonymously wrote, "You want more students to share, but there isn't enough time for me to think before we need to answer." Based on this comment, I increased the amount of individual processing time, and I added an opportunity to share with a partner before a large group share out. If you do have a comment box, plan to commit to the amount of time it requires, though. A comment box provides student voice and thereby builds classroom culture. Listen and know your students. Take note of common interests. For example, are they talking about a game or a TV show? These interests could include hobbies, sports, or activities, or even social causes. A teacher once shared with me that when a new student started talking about Pokemon, she shared her interest in Pokemon Go. A natural connection was made. Another story I heard was that a high school teacher attended a Black Lives Matter protest of which one of his students spoke. On Monday, the teacher acknowledged the student for speaking out for a cause that matters to her and asked how she got involved in the movement. This shows that you are listening and interested in the lives of students and shows that you care, thereby building a positive culture within your classroom and school. Affirming students for who they are and what they bring to the classroom community creates trusting relationships. Affirmations say, "I see you. I recognize and accept you as who you are. I understand and nurture your multiple identities as a learner, as a person of color, as someone who speaks another language," and so on. Affirm aspects of cultural identity that are often not recognized or even negated in society. An example of affirming could be to privately ask a student who speaks a language other than the primary language of instruction if they would be willing to help create or translate a poem or willing to share a part of their culture with the class. By taking this step, you will be listening, validating, and affirming a student, strengthening your relationship with them, forming that trust, and helping to mitigate the potential of fear responses, especially with our most marginalized students. Zaretta Hammond, who I referenced before, says the classroom is a critical container for empowering marginalized students. Visuals and materials send a nonverbal message about what and who is valued in the classroom. And Rhonda Neese also mentioned this morning. Visuals displayed throughout the classroom, in addition to curriculum and other resources such as books and classroom libraries, need to represent the identities and cultures of your students. Materials need to be authentic. Use colors and artistic styles representing students' culture on bulletin boards or in art activities. Decorate with authentic textiles and handcrafts. Include photos of murals from the community. If you aren't sure of the cultures and identities of your students, ask them and their families. Find out from them what represents their culture. That entails having a relationship with them in order to be able to do that. This practice increases student visibility and belonging in the classroom. Notes of appreciation. Most people like to be acknowledged, and written notes can be a preferred method of receiving feedback by some students. Notice positive actions or contributions and write them down. You may have certain notes of appreciation that you can get ready ahead of time as they frequently occur. so that you're ready for the next time a certain student does a specific action. For instance, maybe you've noticed Jamal helping many students this week, so tonight you write an acknowledgement to give to him tomorrow. You may be thinking, my middle schoolers would be mortified if I gave them a note. You will want to set the expectation early in the year that this is a universal practice that you use. What if everyone in your school used it? How would students think about it then? As you consistently use the strategy or any strategy, your students will become accustomed to the strategy and not be embarrassed, as you will do this in an inclusive way. This practice increases feelings of belonging and affirmation in the classroom. Whew. That was 8 strategies. Think about those 8 strategies that you see on this slide and jot down in your journal any that are resonating back with you to take back to your team. But next up, I'm going to talk to you about a group of strategies that are part of establishing routines and rituals. Routines and rituals make our environment predictable and consistent and provide a cue to bring students back to the learning space. Zaretta Hammond tells us that routines put our brains on autopilot, allowing us to reach our goals. So for me, when I think about like driving the same route to work, that is autopilot eventually, right? So think about your route to work, or when you park in the same parking spot, how you naturally just go into that parking spot. This frees up our brain to be aware of traffic patterns when we're used to the routes that we're using. In the classroom, an example of a routine can be the use of a call and response. Call and response is a strategy that can be used as a routine to grab students' attention. So it might sound like this. The teacher says, listen, the students say up. This will cue students to respond whenever the teacher calls by saying, when I say listen, you say up. Listen, up. Students then know that they were about to receive a direction or transition into something new. Greetings are an example of a routine, and Ron Denise talked about greetings this morning. Greeting students at the door, whether that's virtual meeting, a classroom, or even a school, and somebody mentioned in chat about greeting students in the hallway as they enter into the, for the school day. It starts the day or period off on a positive note and gives the teacher an opportunity for a quick emotional check with each student. Some examples of non-contact or virtual greetings can be a wave, a thumbs up, or a verbal hello. Of course, the high five or handshake requires not needing to be socially distant, although I did hear about somebody putting a hand on the end of a yardstick and then someone else had their hand on the end of a yardstick, so they are 6 feet away. Maybe you've seen the videos where the students have a unique handshake and they teach the teacher. Now, some people, and I've heard this, some people say that that doesn't fit who they are. It might be a little bit getting out of our comfort zone to be able to do that. It's okay for teachers and staff to have their own style of greeting as well. You could consider this a fun and easy way you can give student choices. This strategy of greeting creates a positive classroom culture and increases the sense of community and belonging. So group affirmations, we talked before about individual affirmations. Group affirmations can be a powerful daily routine for a classroom. Consider working with your class to develop its own group affirmation that as a classroom you say most days. You might find that either starting or ending the day with the affirmation builds positive culture and relationships. If you don't feel that creative, you can always use this affirmation titled, I am somebody, which was created by the Wisconsin RTI Center's Culture Responsive Practices Coordinator, Andre L. Davis. By using the call and response technique each day, students affirm that they are somebody. When you have time, listen to the video linked on this slide. Be prepared to get goosebumps. It's very touching. Another routine practice is the community circle, which are often called classroom circles. This is one practice that was more frequently used about 20 years ago and is now coming back with our knowledge about the need to take time to build community and trust within the classroom and how that is essential to learning. At the elementary level, community circles are most often a part of the morning routine. At the middle and high school level, they can be embedded into advisory time. Circles are often question-based and everyone gets a choice to respond. A protocol for equity of voice, such as using a talking piece to pass around, is important for each person to have a chance to speak. Teachers act as facilitators rather than direct the dialogue so that students can share authentic voice. An example of a community circle question might be, what is one thing you are most proud of in your role as a friend to someone this past month? This might be a question purposefully used at a time when the social emotional curriculum for a specific grade is focused on friendship skills. As opportunities are needed, individual teachers at grade levels can use the structure of community circles to foster community conversations. This strategy increases the sense of belonging and student voice. Another routine to build and foster community is participating in activities together. Examples of community building activities can be appreciation apology, AHA. As a quick daily closing activity, students gather in a circle and share an appreciation of one of their peers, an apology, or a light bulb moment. The teacher models the activity by sharing and then asks for volunteers to speak. Two truths and a lie. This is a fun getting to know you activity where you give two things about you that are true and one that is not true. The challenge is for the other people to guess the one that's not true. We're building something using marshmallows and toothpicks. Karen enjoys this activity and because it can be directly related to math and science activity as well. She's also done this with spaghetti. You can even do this at a staff meeting. How fun would that be? The next strategy for enhancing positive relationships and learning is specific positive feedback. This type of feedback is immediate and based on a behavior or skill and tells the student what they did to meet the objective for the lesson or the expectations. A behavior example is, Janelle, I see you helped Travis with his math work when you noticed he was waiting for me. Because of that, I was able to help Tracy. An academic example is, Omar, I noticed that you added evidence to your first statement. Or Addie, I see that your multiplication table is complete. It is not good job or well done. Those are vague general statements that don't really tell the students what they did that gave them, that provided the acknowledgement for them. Providing specific positive feedback, 5 times the rate or 5 to 1 of corrective feedback, promotes a positive culture and builds trust, relationships, and affirming student skill and ability. So the final strategy that I'm going to mention is opportunities to respond, and this is critical to student engagement. Teachers need to provide frequent opportunities for students to engage with classroom instruction. Current research indicates that effective teachers often provide 3 to 5 opportunities to respond a minute during simple responses such as verbal or gestures. Of course, there are times when there are more complex tasks that are required of students, such as computing math or writing an essay, and these require more time and less opportunities to respond during that time. Quick opportunities to respond, though, an average 3 to 5 opportunities per minute. So those can include a 1-minute reflection, call and response, 2-minute elbow partner conversation, use of individual whiteboards so everyone has the opportunity to respond to the same question, response cards, hold up a green if you agree and flip it over to the yellow if you disagree, thumbs up or thumbs down, everyone shout out your answer at the same time, and so on. There are many different ways of providing opportunities to respond. You might also be thinking about what opportunities to respond look like in a virtual format. We've demonstrated how the chat box works and gives you time to reflect, but what other opportunities are there in this new learning environment? How can we use them to build culture, especially considering we're coming into a new school year? So the students have new teachers and new groups of new classroom, right? New peers within their settings. Many virtual venues offer polling options. Now you have to take some of this with like what grade or what age are your students and that type of thing, and also what your venue offers. Polling options can be useful tools for formative assessment and to increase student engagement. Using your camera can help, and we talked about nonverbal communication and how that can help. It can also be nerve-wracking for some people as well, so we have to consider that. Consider closely how you use chat and how you would monitor public and private chat. For example, do you allow for private chat during class? You can create options for microphone muting or unmuting in breakout rooms as well. Ensure you've provided specific directions for students so they have the capacity to do small group work in breakout rooms. So this is really being clear about your expectation in a virtual setting, just like you would be clear about your expectations in a face-to-face setting. You could have a procedure such as airplane stacking. You would say, I will choose 3 people to use the microphone. I'll announce their name and then the order in which they'll go, first, second, and then third. I'll go first to model. This way you're creating protocols and your students get used to that routine of a certain protocol and they feel more comfortable. Opportunities to respond, validate and affirm student voice, and increase student engagement. Increased engagement leads to success, which promotes positive culture. Okay, so I've gone through the strategies that enhance learning and positive relationships with students. Obviously, this is not all the strategies. These are the ones for today, though. So we would like you to consider these adult practices and take some time to write down 2 practices that you will bring back to your PBS leadership team after the conference. These may be practices you're already familiar with and they maybe just need to be tweaked, or they could be new skills that you want to build across your whole school community. Either way, you are adding tools to your toolbox. And the leadership team drives your system. So the majority of what I talked about today were practices. Now it's important to talk about the role of the leadership team. When it comes to adult practices, the role of the leadership team is to ensure that each chosen practice is implemented as intended across the school. That's really, really important, that we're implementing with fidelity and that the practice is being implemented across the entire school so all students have access and benefit from any given practice. The team provides comprehensive professional development, support, and coaching in an ongoing and sustainable manner. I'm going to say that again. The team provides a comprehensive professional development, support, and coaching in an ongoing sustainable manner to all staff to be able to implement any given practice with fidelity. The team monitors the use of the practice so that they gauge the need for additional professional learning so that the practice is implemented with fidelity. For example, the leadership team at a middle school decides that advisory period is going to include daily community circles. The leadership team is going to form subcommittees to have a 6th grade, a 7th grade, and an 8th grade focus. Using the 2nd step curriculum, which is taught universally to all middle school students, and input from the student committee, grade level teachers can develop community circle questions. The leadership team develops a professional learning plan to train staff and then provide ongoing support to all instructional staff on the purpose and structure of community circles so that they are able to use the community circle practice as intended. The leadership team seeks feedback from staff and students to gauge effectiveness and provide continued support and coaching as needed. So pick 1 or 2 strategies to put into place across your system, across your school, or across your district with fidelity. When we do too much, we have a hard time doing any given practice with fidelity. Pick 1 or 2, which leads me to the next reflection. We're going to give you 3 minutes to think about you can think about the practices, but it's really important to think about what is your next step for bringing the practices that you've identified to your leadership team and creating actions in how to instill those or install those practices across your school or district, or maybe at your next team meeting even. Check out the resources at the end of this PowerPoint to find more information. You could even connect with your technical assistance coordinator to support you. It's really important for you to at least get your first 1 or 2 steps of what you're going to do down so that you can systematically implement any given practice across your school building.